Welcome back to Siesta with Suki. As always, thank you so much for joining me. You've been with me through conversations, through journeys, through laughter, through education, and we just want to continue that process today. I always tell you I have a special guest, so we're just going to go with they're always special. By the time I call and talk to them, it's because in my mind, there's just really some important information that we can share. In part, I learn from every single episode, and I'm hoping that you with me on this journey are learning too. So today I am joined by Andreas Johnson, and I'm probably doing that NPR thing, right? Where they like say the word with a Spanish accent, so I don't want to mess up his name. So I'm going to let him tell you his name properly, and we are going to dive into his journey before we talk about a very human topic, I will say. The topic of human beings relocating from one area to another, sometimes under duress, and what he does to assist in that passageway. So without further ado, Drew.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. So first we siesta. So this is called Siesta with Suki for a reason, because irrespective of the topic we're talking about, we are fun, and we have fun. And we are going to salute each other.
Salud. Thank you.
And the time that you've taken to just come and talk to us. Besitos. I know some of y'all remember besitos. So I always like to start the audience back at your beginning. I want them to know you. So I'm going to take you back, just feel like it's like a mind regression thing. You are 5 years old. Where are you, and what are you thinking?
5 years old. I'm in Berkeley, California.
Okay.
And I'm kind of a shy kid, not too outgoing, not too talkative. Always keep competing with my elder brothers, who one is older, one is younger. I'm either one of the two oldest or one of the two youngest. You're too young to go. You're too old to to do something like that. You should have known better. But in general, it was a good childhood, and I feel very fortunate to have grown up in that area, that region, where the people are just very different, very open-minded, very outgoing, very berserkly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're gonna fast forward just a little bit to your teenager, because presumably that's when we start, forming our ideas about ourselves and the world.
Okay.
So with that
well,
point,
if I might
yes,
regress
please.
a little bit more to like 10 years old.
Okay, let's go to 10.
10 years old, my mother and stepfather, they decided to move to Mexico.
Ah, okay.
And,
what part of Mexico?
Yalapa, Jalisco.
Okay.
Yalapa is a small kind of fishing village just south of Puerto Vallarta.
Okay.
Only accessible, especially at the time, only accessible by boat. No cars, no roads, no electricity, no phones, TV, nothing like that. You can only get there by boat or by mule. And it was a small town of maybe 1,200 people. Very primitive, very, very beautiful, incredible natural scenery and setting. And it was kind of the beginning of what I call my life, my current life. It was just a whole new way of life, and it helped me to appreciate other people and to feel interested in other people, get to know people who weren't like me, who spoke a different language, and gave me kind of a sense of empathy or compassion for people who didn't have what we had, or who weren't able to do what we were able to do, or employ who we were able to employ. So it gave me kind of a whole different outlook, and it helped set me
on this journey.
I guess, on this journey. Yeah.
What was their why? Your parents?
I'm sorry?
What was their why? Like why they even decided to do that?
Just incredibly beautiful, very natural, very calm, very peaceful, very just away from the rat race, away from the Vietnam War, away from the politics, away from kind of everything. You could really escape there. It was such a small community. And, with no television, no radio, you really got to just kind of develop yourself in a whole different way.
How long did you spend there?
I was there almost 5 years.
Okay.
Until I moved back up to the Bay Area and went to high school in Alameda with my father.
Okay. So how was that transition for you?
Very difficult.
Okay.
Very, very difficult. Moving to Yalapa was easy. It was fun. It was exciting, and loved it. But that's really kind of where I developed my sense of who I was. And I moved back up to the States and the Bay Area, and it was a complete culture shock to me. I never really got over that.
Okay.
And that even kind of affects me until this day. I just never felt a part of the States. I always felt different. I never walked right, spoke right, dressed right, and I just felt like very much an outsider. I felt very much like a foreigner, very much like how I imagine a lot of the people I'm working with feel once they get here to Mexico or up to the States. It was kind of a rough journey. I really regressed in my sense of self.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. So when did that start to come back? So you finished high school presumably.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do after high school?
I did a little bit of community college and realized it wasn't really where I wanted to go. I didn't have a definite interest. My parents hadn't been really involved in gearing me towards a particular profession or education or university, and I was free to kind of make my own decisions. And when I was 21, my mother passed on, and then shortly after I moved down to Southern California, to Santa Barbara, California, where I had grandparents and where my mother had eventually moved up to and then died. And for me, that was kind of a reawakening. It was kind of a new start for me. I think just kind of being on my own, having, I guess, kind of a fresh start, being away from my father and away from home and the people I knew. It just allowed me to have a fresh start. And I found a job. I began working, and just began to develop a sense of confidence in myself and new interests and new friends and had a social life for the first time in my life. Or not first time in my life, but first time in a long time. And a sense of pride in my work and helping people. It always seemed to be that the jobs I enjoyed most were helping people, either just serving them with what it is that they needed, or helping them with one particular problem or difficulty or another.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you didn't have, because I guess these days especially, they want kids, you're 17 years old and they want you to pick a major and what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And that's tough, right? Because when sometimes you just have to know what's going to be the principle of your life. In your case, the principle of your life was a foundation of helping. And so once you understood that, then everything that follows that, whether or not you can be happy or not, whether or not you're helping people or not. So anyway, I'm like an armchair psychologist here. Yes, so this is the internet now, we can do that. So you're at, so when do you, I'm assuming, because you mentioned the culture shock, that there's a point that you say to yourself, you need to leave again, the United States.
Yeah.
So when does that happen for you?
That eventually happened in 1999, after having lived in Santa Barbara from 83 to 99. And I was fortunate enough to have been able to buy a house at the time when the market was very low, and I found a fixer-upper, and I fixed it up pretty much all by myself, doing everything, electrical, plumbing, etc. And
I think I might need you then. Okay,
I'm sorry?
I might need you then.
Yeah. And that gave me a real sense of confidence and pride, and it was something I was always kind of lacking in. I was never very self-confident or had a lot of value in myself, so that really helped.
Can I ask you a quick question about that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you self-aware of that now, or were you always self-aware?
I think always, to some degree, self-aware of that. Yeah,
Okay.
I was always aware of that.
And you felt like it was a wrong, or it was just an is?
It just was.
Okay.
Yeah, it just was.
Okay.
Yeah, I accepted it.
Yeah. Well, so again, we're going to
Yeah.
do a little armchair psychologist,
Yeah.
because the thing is, especially these days, we kind of tell everyone that they've got to be rah and gregarious and go out and da 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 and all this other stuff. And the thing is, can you imagine if we all were like that? Really, like the world would probably look crazy.
Yeah.
Like we actually need people who are calm. We need people who take the time to stop and think, and who are just not so. You can't have people without the support. And if we don't have legitimate supporters, it's never going to work anyway. That's the only way we can all work together. So anyway, I'm here to tell you that your way, we're going to salute to your way, is not about a confidence or any of that. It is exactly what the people who you serve need and what the people around you need to be that best version of Drew that doesn't necessarily need all of that, rah-rah stuff around. To be okay and self-satisfied with who they are. So anyway, that's a freebie for you. So I will let you get back to you're already welcome. Your self-awareness as you're sharing with us.
Yeah.
So you fix up the house, which is fantastic because I've been part of some fixer up. So I can't say I do all of it myself. I'm probably more supervisor. But it's a lot of work. And it is a really good sense of satisfaction. It's like
it's a labor of love.
Labor of love.
Yeah.
It's like the massive 10,000 Lego pieces thing. You just keep working on it. The puzzles.
Yeah.
I don't think kids do that anymore.
No.
You know that puzzle that's like a million pieces, and it takes you months before everyone comes together and they do a piece a day.
Yeah.
So that satisfaction is a good thing to have had in your life. So talk to me. So you've done this. To get the house.
So with the house, I was fortunate enough to have an income. In '99, I lost my job due to a layoff, a merger, and I thought, well, I've got this house.
Where were you working?
I'd been working for a local bank
Okay.
down there in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
And once the merger took place, I was no longer with the job, and had a little bit of a severance package. And decided to go ahead and fulfill my dream a little bit earlier than retirement age. And so I moved to Bali, Indonesia.
Okay.
I had been there about 10 years prior, absolutely loved it, dreamt of it.
Before you do that, so what did you do with the house?
I packed my things up and I rented it out.
Okay, got it.
So that helped keep me going while I was in Bali for the first few years. And I got to Bali, again, culture shock. What have I done? Honestly, Drew, you really should have thought this out better. But no, I knew that, it was kind of where I was meant to kind of start again. And so I found myself for the first month doing a little bit of traveling around, trying to figure out where I might like to settle. I settled in Ubud, Bali, where once again I took this old house. I didn't buy it, I was just renting it, but he agreed to let me pay him for 2 years in advance if I used that same money to renovate it and remodel it, and it desperately needed it. So I did that. Again, I really enjoyed doing so. But I really began to kind of slow down and began to kind of appreciate things and people and art and culture a bit more. And Bali is such a unique culture. Such a unique culture. Not so much nowadays. I mean, it is, but it's changed quite a bit since I first arrived. But it really just kind of opened me up a little bit to new experiences and new people and new ways of thinking. And so I ended up being in Bali for 20 years.
Wow.
Almost 20 years, about 19 and a half.
So you have to talk about what you do for 20 years in Bali.
Yeah.
2 years we have house building.
Yeah.
What else are you doing?
Well, I did a lot of house building while I was down there. A lot of remodels for friends. A lot of times just free because I enjoyed doing it. Sometimes for a very small amount of pay. And did a few remodels myself for houses that I was in. I never actually bought a house there, but you would rent it or lease it. And you would pay for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in advance, depending on what you wanted, or you make some arrangement with the owner. And then you would go ahead and just do the changes that you wanted. You'd put in a pool, or you would change the roof, or you'd add a bedroom or a skylight or whatever. And that I really found a lot of enjoyment in. It was a lot of fun taking this fixer-upper and kind of creating a new space and new feeling, and then getting the satisfaction of living in it. And I did that quite a bit, but not full-time by any means. But the times that where I wasn't working, I would just enjoy a very quiet, relaxed life. I was about a block and a half from the beach. I would do my morning walks. I had a dog as well. Spent time You know,
This
taking
sounds
it
so
places.
nice. I am amazed by what I know you do now, right? Because I'm like, he had this life. This was what I was looking for. Which reminds me, I was thinking, what language do they speak in Bali?
Indonesian.
So you speak presumably Indonesian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So this sounds like life is going quite well. So how come we're not in Bali still?
Yeah. Well, the reason we're not in Bali anymore, I just, saw the ways of life there and things that I didn't totally agree with and things that bothered me and annoyed me. And eventually I just had to say, I've had a good long stay here and it's time to move on. And also, as I'd been away so far from home for so many years, I wanted to move closer to home, closer to California. And I didn't think I'd be able to afford Mexico, even though Mexico had always been in my heart. I always wanted to return to Mexico and be here again. But I just knew I couldn't afford it at the time, so I chose Colombia.
Okay.
And that was a great place for a couple of years.
What part of Colombia?
It was in the northern part, the state of Magdalena, in the city of Santa Marta, which is right on the coast. And very tropical, beautiful, incredible heat and humidity. But yeah, it was a great experience and really not what started me off on where I've eventually ended up, but I saw and met thousands of Venezuelans who had been fleeing their own country and into Colombia, their neighboring country. And it was a very difficult thing to see, families living on the streets, children begging, fathers trying to desperately make a living on the corners on the streets, selling cold water or bag of limes or window washing, windshield washing. And it just was really obvious they were struggling. They were really struggling, and it just saddened me, and it just made me feel sick. And I so many times tried to put myself into their situation and how it might feel to be sleeping there or begging or having a newborn baby and not having formula or diapers. And it just really saddened me, and it just kind of, made me want to do something and made me want to help. And
so it was your call to action.
That was kind of the start.
But you did do some helping there, because I know, because I watched. So talk to me, tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, I would make daily rounds around town, and I would always be sure to carry coin, like a big supply of coin in my pocket. I'd have to go from bank to bank to try to find the coin. It wasn't easy, actually. But I would go around, and even though it was just a small amount, it was something. It was something enough to get some water or get something similar to a sandwich.
Okay.
And so it wasn't a great amount, but it was help. And it also just let them know that there was someone who was thinking about them. I would oftentimes seek out, these particular families or individuals or people. I would make my rounds and make sure I never missed a spot or missed someone, and try to make sure that I would stop by and say hello. And I'm not much of a talker. I'm not a real conversationalist, so I wouldn't spend half an hour there talking to them. But I'd leave them with with a little bit of hope and a little bit of money to use however they wanted. Again, it wasn't very much. But then I began seeing more of a need than just coin, and I would help people with buying a used bike or kind of like a four-wheel push cart, which they could use to dump up or filled up with recycling or construction debris or whatever, and they could use that to help take away construction debris or go around and pick up recycling goods. They could use that to make some money to help pay their nightly rent or food for their family. And I tried a number of times trying to find ways in which people could try to make money on their own by giving them a little bit of a startup chance, a startup money, or helping them with equipment or the stove or the bike or supplies. And for some it did really work well. They used it well and benefited from it. Others weren't quite so successful. But that was when was the beginning of the epidemic was
2020.
2020.
Yeah.
And when I heard, I was just about ready. I was running through my savings so fast down there.
Well, okay, before we do that, I've been wondering about how I can nominate you for sainthood. I'm not a good Catholic, so I don't know anything about this. But I know there's a way. I saw something the other day. There's a kid. They nominated him. So somebody please put in the comments and find for me. How do we nominate Drew? Living sainthood. We don't want to wait till we're gone.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have brought ourselves to the pandemic, which changed all of our lives fairly drastically. So you're in Colombia during that time.
Yeah, Santa Marta with tons of Venezuelan refugees. I would say 100,000 easily.
Wow.
Well, actually, there were millions in the country at that time. By that time, but yeah, they were all over town, and so I was just about ready to move up to Oaxaca permanently.
So how'd you even hear about Oaxaca?
Burned out.
How does Oaxaca get to?
Well, Mexico. I was burned out on Colombia. And burned out on what I was doing. I was running out of money. I didn't know how I was going to continue supporting. And also my father was getting older and sicker, and I needed to be closer. Mexico is considerably closer than Colombia.
Yes.
So I made the decision to move up to Mexico. Why Oaxaca? Because Merida was too damned hot.
Yes.
And coming from Santa Marta, Colombia, I wasn't going to go there again. It was just too much. So Oaxaca promised cooler weather, drier weather.
That was true 4 years ago.
That was 3 years ago.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. Because right now we don't know if Oaxaca's fulfilling the promise.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So I ended up here.
Okay. This is before pandemic. So what's your time? Because Colombia ended up closing. Because we actually lived in Colombia for a little bit.
Oh.
We were in Medellin.
Oh, right.
And we actually lived in Envigado, and the plan was to move back permanently to Sabaneta, which is a little further out from Medellin. So we had everything lined up, even started the process of starting a business to get residency. And then the pandemic was around February, I think they started talking about it. And we didn't understand at all how the world was going to shut down until it shut down. And then you couldn't get back into Colombia, but even more, because we had friends and people there, their policies were a bit draconian. When you talk about, coming out and in the home and what have you. And for us, it was actually very interesting to watch governments and how they behaved during that time to really get us, because you never get to see a real life living example of something like that. And Mexico, as you know, Mexico was like bienvenido, and had a very different attitude. But it was something about Colombia that probably surprised me, because I would not have expected that level of. I remember talking to some people, like you could leave your house for 1 hour a day. And
once a week.
Once a week.
It started out once a week, depending on the last number of your ID card.
And I was like, are people really following this? This is really hard. When you have children, if you were above a certain age, you couldn't go out at all.
Right.
And if you're under a certain age, if you had young children, they couldn't get out. Older people, you couldn't get out. I mean, it was very
tough. It was scary, and I panicked. Not for myself. I ended up being stuck there because they closed the border 2 days before I was to fly to Mexico. So I ended up getting stuck there. Thankfully, I was able to stay in the apartment that I'd been in since arriving there. But it really worried me. It really frightened me, because not so much, again, for myself. I would be able to take care of myself. But thinking of the refugees, the Venezuelans, who depended on being out there every day trying to find work, doing whatever they could. That was what really worried me, because we'd heard that there was going to be like a complete lockdown. You've got to stay in home. You can't come out more than an hour once a week, and only depending on the last number of your ID card. Many Venezuelans didn't even have ID. And I just thought, how are they going to survive? How are they going to make money? How are they going to pay their nightly rent? They don't pay it on a weekly or monthly basis. They pay it on a daily. And if they don't pay, they don't sleep there. Wow. They sleep on the street. Okay. And I was just, it really worried me. It really, really worried me. And I didn't know how they were going to feed themselves, how they were going to, take care of themselves.
So do you know the answer to that? Because I mean, the lockdown was I have no idea. What do you do if you're a refugee and you actually don't have a place to be locked down in?
Yeah. Well, those who are already on the street, they just stayed there on the street, but they weren't really allowed to pass around too much. They weren't allowed to walk into, say, the market neighborhood or area. And so, yeah, it just became really a desperate time for them, pure survival. And at that point, I was lucky enough to have not only a driver's license, but a passport and a resident card there.
Okay.
And so I could get away with leaving town or leaving my house and using, whatever card that.
I see. So you could leave your house three times a week.
I could go out 3 times a week. And so what I began doing was buying in bulk large bags of rice and beans and lentils and corn flour, sugar, and then tuna and diapers and sanitary pads and soap and things like that, to be able to help pass around bags to those families that I'd see on the street or people that I knew that weren't finding work, because as kind of risky as it was, they had to come out to the street.
Yes.
They had no other option. And so they had to come out to the street to try to find help, whether it was begging or one thing or another. And it was a constant game of the police or the Guardia, running them off and or trying to catch them. Some of them were put in jail for overnight, for having, left their house or played basketball. And then it got to the point where things were a little bit more relaxed. And so the refugees or the Venezuelans would come to my front gate, and I would have bags of food ready for them. And it started out with 10 a day to 20 to 30 to 40. And then towards the end, it was 100 people a day coming to my gate. At that point, I couldn't keep up with financially or otherwise those supplies. So I'd only offer them one supply, and it was whatever they needed, whether it was diapers or tuna or corn flour or beans.
Okay.
And
you did this by yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
I just need this for the same application.
Yeah.
So
I was fortunate to have had some savings when I got to Colombia.
Okay. And you use the savings to help save other people.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing to use savings for if you're gonna do that.
And thankfully there was another group who was 2 other groups, one in town and one up in the hills. The one up in the hills was doing like a soup kitchen. I tried to help them financially from time to time. And the other group who would hand out bags of just essential goods once a week, I would help support them as well, because they were doing good work, and they were getting people that I wasn't seeing or helping. And so towards the end of the pandemic, I think it was September, I began to run out of funds, and I just thought, I've got to leave. I can't stay here because it's going to be too difficult for them to accept that I'm no longer able to help them. Yeah. And the border finally opened up, and I got here in Oaxaca the 7th of October. And kind of just a big sigh of relief because, suddenly, I'd not really lost all that stress, but I was no longer under all that stress of trying to provide for
all these
so
people.
Many people.
Yes,
yeah.
all these families.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't stay stress-free for long because
No.
We're going to actually end right there with you all. I just need to invite you all to come back with me to part 2, because we are going to talk about how this led to the current situation and program in Oaxaca. In this video, in the next video, I will definitely put for you all how to help. So I'm just going to do a shameless ask for you now. And, even if you don't watch it, you look at the description. Seriously, there are people, sometimes we all want to help at some point, right? And sometimes some people have the time, some people have the money, some people have the thoughts. We all can help in some way. It doesn't have to always be monetarily. Sometimes it's just by sharing the information with someone else. Sharing that extra bag of rice that we have. Where can I go to drop off that bag of rice or that bean or whatever it is? I only have one day that I can volunteer in the year. That's okay. What Drew has done is sainthood, so we're going to put in the application, so that's why we're taking notes. But we can all be kind of our little saints in our own way. So what I'm going to do in the description, I am going to put links for you. Links to a GoFundMe, links to how you can volunteer if you happen to be here in Oaxaca. Volunteering does not mean you give up your life. One day is good enough. If you have a thought about something that you can do, you can help, a resource. Maybe you're good at something. You've got some skill that can help the organization, some knowledge that can help the organization. That's good enough too. So there's no long-term obligation, and there is no help that is turned away. So I'm even going to make this a short for you, even if you don't watch the whole thing. Seriously, really, we can all help each other as human beings, and we haven't even gotten to part 2 yet, so I know that you don't know the whole story, but you know the person behind the story. And as he mentioned, he used his savings to save people. And we can all kind of come together and do a little bit of that as well. So that's what I leave you with. So whatever you're feeling, guilt, it's fine. Press the button. I'm okay with guilt. Inspiration, that's cool too. Press the button. Whatever it is you're feeling, it's perfectly okay. Let's just all come together and see how we can all be a part of saving some other folks' lives. So, with that said, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Siesta with Suki, with my conversation here with Drew, and we will see each other on the other side on part 2. Ciao.